And then when he's on his hands and knees, they attack him with samurai sword and knives. He loses his right eye. I was like, wait a minute, he survived? They him all the way through with the samurai sword, and he survived.
An 80-year-old man got through the chest. That old.
Meet Uncle Kenny, a thoughtful truth seeker who blends investigative curiosity with philosophical depth, dissecting AI ethics and cult-like communities with dry wit and a pop culture-infused spiritual flair.
That's crazy. So he's an Oxford University student.
Yeah.
Some very intelligent people are involved in this.
So Ziz goes to the Bay Area. Gwen just left a suicide note and then disappeared. He took a big issue, not necessarily with sexual misconduct, but with paying out of a black male.
Desiree podcast.
Laundry and put it on my bed.
Oh yeah, it sets the scene.
People keep roasting me for not having made my bed, so I was thinking of doing this bit where I just make it increasingly messy by adding dirty clothes and things like that to it, but I actually wash them and it's in the other room, so.
It'd be good if you had pictures of all the Zizians with interconnected strings. That'd be cool.
It's funny you mentioned that. I actually do have a bunch of sticky notes on my wall right there, but it's on that wall, not behind me, because some of the stuff is not necessarily for public consumption. Yeah. So.
Okay. Really? Why?
Certain things that are just people tell me off the record that I want to look into, but are not something that I should be sharing publicly, or stuff that's unconfirmed but really inflammatory, or or stuff that's true but not relevant to the facts and really salacious, but I might want to look up, you know what I mean? So it's things I want to organize and kind of keep track of, but not necessarily stuff that would I guess be prudent to post.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, cool. And what do you want to be called?
Just Ken is fine.
Just so I'm just gonna okay, cool, just Ken. All right. If you're going to be writing under if you're going to be writing scripts and stuff, do you have a last name that I can call you, Ken something? Because I'll be putting it probably on the YouTube title and stuff like that.
Well, I guess you could just identify me as Uncle Kenny.
Uncle Kenny. All right, cool. Cool.
I just became an uncle recently, and it's not my display name anymore because I had a spiritual revelation about Twin Peaks, but it's and by spiritual revelation I mean my friend Darby explained it to me, and it really is resonating with my life in a way that's very difficult to communicate, but
What? Okay. I kind of want to know, but
Okay, well, I'm going to butcher it a little bit because it was really my friend Darby who understood it. But it's have you seen Twin Peaks or The Return?
No.
Okay. So basically, there's this guy, Dale Cooper. He's the main character, Con McLaughlin, right? He's an FBI agent who's sort of investigating Twin Peaks and is also kind of a little bit into the paranormal aspects that happen during the show. And, a lot of the paranormal stuff is sort of presented in sort of an absurdist way where there's a lot of characters who don't necessarily, know what to do, or they're oh, that's weird, or, they don't, it's not oh, something's paranormal is going on here, we should get to the bottom of this, and, but he is. And then in The Return, through this sort of paranormal world-shifting thing, he sort of ends up in this really mentally slow state in this alternate version of himself called Dougie Jones. And when he's you want Dale to solve the mystery because the original 2 seasons of Twin Peaks left on a huge cliffhanger where it's but then basically Dale Cooper spends the vast majority of the new show just going Dougie Jones, and he's sort of a mentally disabled Mr. Magoo type character, but he still just through following his intuition and luck manages to solve the this other case that's sort of new with his new family or whatever. And I think part of it, the thing about it that's really getting to me is that Dale Cooper is sort of this like embodiment of like the logos, and he's like super intelligent and has all these like theories about like what the paranormal things could be going on. But even when that's all taken away and he's incredibly like stupid, just by still following his intuition and being stupid but being himself, he still solves the mystery. And actually this is like the timeline or whatever where he could have like a wife and kids and happy life, and he throws it away. And I think just sort of and I think that's what a lot of Twin Peaks is about, is the sort of like the masculine rationalizing instinct attempting to like control and dominate the sort of feminine chaotic instinct, and that like basically it ends tragically because Dale Cooper is not, he has to understand everything and he has to unravel everything and he has to like make things be a certain way when it didn't need to be that way. And, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't even know if Darby's going to want to talk about it publicly, but, you could definitely DM her, and she'd be, down for it. But, yeah.
That gives me chills. Are you in a place right now where you are coming to more acceptance of your feminine instincts? Or, like, the chaos in your life?
I don't think so. I think for me, it's more just sort of, like, I guess realizing that, like sort of realizing that I've been like prioritizing my ego a little bit too much and not enough prioritizing like the work. You know what I mean? And that's what it's really like. That's what I think like Twin Peaks is about, but I feel like how it like resonates with me is like, focusing more on like doing the work. But,
yeah.
So I don't know if any of that made sense or if you want to keep any of that in.
It makes perfect sense.
Okay.
It makes perfect sense. There's this, I play music and there's this like state that I can get into where it feels like somebody else is playing the instrument, which I think is kind of I don't know if it's an egoless state. I don't know if I've experienced egolessness exactly, but I think it's close to that, perhaps.
Yeah. Because it's like thinking about whether something is good or bad or whether you're doing poorly or well is sort of like looking at it through like an ego perspective. And instead of just saying, okay, well, what note should come next? Or like how should the song progress or whatever, is more like work focused. So yeah, that does make a lot of sense.
Yeah. I've heard this idea that even low self-esteem is a form of narcissism, which
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know if I can fully resonate with that. I'm definitely more down on myself than I am.
Really?
But I'm but I'm also like doing a lot of practices to shift that. Like, it's very possible. I've seen other people do it to become a positive person, and I'm like, okay, I can do that. And like, I have a lot of manifestation practices around it. But there's a lot for me as well around when you say giving up the ego in place of the work. That resonates with me a lot.
I feel like the first time I like encountered this like idea is when I was listening to like Jordan B. Peterson videos or whatever, and he was like he like interpreted like the I think the ancient Sumerian god Marduk, although don't quote me on that, as having like 1,000 eyes, and he said one of the things that made him heroic is that he paid attention, which was what 1,000 eyes were supposed to represent. And he sort of like went into this like segue where he was like, if you're self-conscious, that means you're not paying enough attention. So, if there's something where you're like really like self-conscious, that it means that you're like too focused like inward and you're not like paying enough attention to what's going on around you.
Oh, I don't remember that, but I fucking love Jordan Peterson. He's changed my life. I love Jordan Peterson.
Really? That's cool. He's so like not cool anymore, but like he, there was a point in my life where I needed to like, not be thinking the way I was thinking, and working at Walmart and listening to like 4 hours of Jordan Peterson just talk is like...
I literally got jobs. I was like probably in my very early 20s when I found him, and I got jobs that I could listen to podcasts in the jobs. Gardener.
Dude,
and
this is crazy.
Yeah. I was just like, yep, it was great. So I was working these minimum wage jobs, but I was like, oh, I'm getting paid to like listen to Jordan Peterson and like some Harvard lectures. Like, who gets paid to go to Harvard? But, it's just incredible. It's amazing.
Me too. I did, I think it was Harvard, or no, it was Robert Sapolsky, Human Behavioral Biology at Yale. Did you listen to that too?
Yeah, that was great. Yeah.
Dude, this is crazy.
Amazing.
I thought I was like super special for doing this, but it's like no, yeah, this is just it just makes sense, you know. So
Yeah. I think Jordan Peterson. I think he seems to be different now. I think he kind of what I think is he kind of, like Jesus, sacrificed himself in a way. I think he went on this crazy tour, and he took these benzos, and he just burned himself out. And I think he helped an enormous amount of people, and he was probably a very big reason for this cultural shift now. And he kind of gave up a giant part of himself. Like, he gave up a lot of his logos for the sake of saving others, I think.
It's a very steel band, I guess, approach to it. I feel like, well, I mean, I don't know. Like what you're saying does make sense in a way, and he is more of like a relic of like sort of the right wing sort of. Well, I mean, I don't know. He would never have called himself right wing like pre-coma or conservative or anything like that. But you know, the sort of speakers who are more latched onto by sort of like young right wing men. But I think he was, he's just an extraordinarily, like, positive figure. And it's like, you compare him to, like, the people who sort of succeeded him in, like, the marketplace, if you look at it that way, of, like, I don't know, Andrew Tate or whoever. It's like, it's in a very new, they make them a lot more nasty nowadays. You know what I mean? And I think, like, back then it was, like, he was very...
I'm sorry I interrupted you. I shouldn't have. Yeah,
that's okay. I interrupt a lot, so I deserve it.
It's just karma. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. I think his chronic pain makes him too just like emotionally sensitive and irritable, and I think that people feed into that aspect. I feel like the people around him and the fans are very happy to see an angrier version of Jordan, and I think that that's really sad. But also like having certain like pain or health things really do affect like how irritable and angry you are, and I think that I chalk it up to a lot about that, but I don't know, maybe I'm just trying to defend him in my own way, I guess.
I like that he's in touch with his emotions. I like that he cries.
Yeah,
I used to think that I used to have this idea that like he was too tribal, and he was kind of too like people who are really super woke won't respond to his message because he's so polarizing. But now there does seem to have been a giant shift, although now the right's like insane, and so I don't know, maybe it's not that good anyway. But it does seem like the kind of crazy woke is like lessened a lot, which is nice. I don't know if it's going to be replaced by anything better. We'll see. We'll see how we go.
All I know is that we're living in some interesting times, that's for sure.
I'm here for the ride.
It's funny, I actually, when I was really getting into him at the beginning, I would sort of talk about his ideas and share videos of his with, like, my friends, because this is before I was really into Twitter, so, I was doing a lot more sort of, I guess, talking about ideas with, like, people in real life, and, people would respond pretty poorly to his stuff, and they were like, oh, well, he phrased this way, which means this is what he thinks about, it was usually about, like, women. And it, like, wasn't, but he's such a sort of scatterbrained thinker, and he's not particularly worried about, like, hedging himself, especially, like, back in the day, right? Because it's, like, all in the context of, like a lecture series where, like, people can say, oh, well, you said this, did you mean this? And he's like, no, I didn't. And also, like, sort of building off their assumed knowledge instead of just having it be taken, like, quote-unquote out of context in, like, a 10-minute YouTube video. But, I think, like, if you sort of, like, see everything that he's saying in, like, in the context of everything else he says, then he's not, like, very much of a right-wing or controversial figure. But there's but, he goes on tangents a lot, which is why I feel like he was, like, we sort of think in similar ways, and I think, that we sort of talk and think going off on, like, weird tangents and things like that. So I feel like he was, like, he's just very prone to saying things that look bad and not around people who are necessarily like demanding that he give the proper context. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, absolutely. The problem, I had the exact same issue when I showed videos to my friends, and it was like, no, you just have to listen to a 14-part lecture series.
No, in part 13, he explains why chaos isn't actually bad. It's just, like, maybe slightly imbalanced in people's lives or this or that or whatever, you know? Like...
Yes, women are chaos, but you don't understand what he means by chaos. You actually have to go back to lecture 22. Yeah, like... Yeah.
This whole lecture is about how chaos is, like, hot, actually, okay? Like...
Yeah.
He just, describes the archetype of the BPD girlfriend.
I'm glad. I feel like I totally feel like I think a lot like him as well. It's interesting to meet someone else who's really, he just resonates with certain people. He's just on a certain vibe and he resonates with certain people. I think I have now discovered, especially because my husband is very into like kind of Eastern stuff, like meditation and stuff like that. And so I've kind of discovered there's this idea where you can to be like I don't know how to say it exactly, but to be like an enlightened being, like a really great person, right? Like you have to you have to clean up your shit internally, and you also have to achieve kind of there's ways to describe it. There's this guy who wrote this book called The Finders, and he talks about achieving what people personally usually call enlightenment or something like that, but it's kind of like a state of being happy all the time, not having like an inner voice that's constantly talking to you. Memories don't really come up very much. Like you're just in the present a lot of times. And there's people who say, like, is it better to do the blissful state first? I don't know what to call it. I don't really want to call it enlightenment, but like that state first, or is it better to clean up your shit first? And Jordan Peterson is all about cleaning up your shit first, and not really he doesn't care about happiness. Like personal happiness, I don't know if he doesn't care about it, but it's very low on the agenda. Whereas I think my husband definitely went for the personal happiness, that kind of meditative, blissful, in the moment state, and then kind of later in his life cleaned his shit up a lot more. And I think it's much easier to take that path, because if you're always happy and everything feels much easier. But I have certainly found that Jordan Peterson was a good place to start for me. And like things like telling the truth, like never lie.
Yeah.
Like that's a really great way to get towards the enlightenment path anyway. Like they kind of feed into each other, but I think Peterson is half the equation.
Okay. I think a big reason why Peterson really downplays the focus on being happy is because he has, I think, pretty severe clinical depression that also like his father had and his daughter has or had, which is somewhat mitigated by his like crazy diet. But but I do think that's, he's like, well, trying to focus on being happy is really just like, it just like, probably seem like something like out of his control. You know what I mean? So yeah. I feel, and I think that it does seem a little bit more like robust, like how like Jung would come up with, like Carl Jung treated like most of his patients were in like the top like 5% or like 1% of patients that other therapists couldn't help or were actively making worse. You know what I mean? So it was like, I think that probably Peterson's advice for people who are just sort of, it does make sense for people who are maybe have something dispositional or medical that kind of does make that really hard, and who just saying like, focus on your bliss, focus on what makes you happy is sort of like a non-starter. But it would also make sense that he doesn't have like the answers for everything and is like, one half of that. I haven't really thought about following my bliss that much, but
I wouldn't call it following your bliss. I would call it listening to your emotions more than anything. Like,
oh, okay.
And meditating is a good way to do that. But it's like, I like to separate my internal state into layers. So like, there's the story layer of like what happened to me, or like my memories. Like I'm talking to Ken right now, and then there's how I feel, which is slightly nervous but very calm, like very peaceful mostly and good. And then there's the story that I make up about the like there's a sensation, and then I'm thinking about the sensation, and then I create an emotion from it, like in my mind, and then my action. So there's like multiple layers to things. And then like if I take out the story, which is, you don't really want to have a story too much, and I just focus on my emotions, then I can kind of process them more easily oftentimes. And like, it's not about really focusing on your bliss. It's more about letting your emotions be there and not trying to suppress them or change them. And then eventually they kind of clear out, and then you can process bad emotions quickly, and then good emotions kind of, you can do things that like help the good emotions rise. And then but there's pitfalls everywhere. I feel like we should probably start talking about the Zizians, if that's okay with you.
What if we just like rug pulled people and talked about Jordan Peterson for like 3 hours?
we
and they were like, what
could.
the fuck?
I'm into it. I'm going to be like, we're going to reveal something about the Zizians that you've never heard before. And we don't even talk about the Zizians. We just Peterson pill people.
It'd be so
somewhere
funny.
in this
I
podcast.
wish my brother lived in here with me, because he has a really funny Jordan Peterson accent, and I could just like feed him a script about like Peterson like dissecting the Zizians and stuff. It's like, and you know, the basilisk, now there's chaos.
The thing about Ziz is he's a king, but he's also a queen. And yeah, I would love to hear. So can you tell us about how you became interested in the Zizians? You're now a Zizian investigative journalist, I believe.
Yeah.
And who are they?
I guess I am. And who what?
Who are they? Like, who are they, and how did you find them?
Right. So basically, it was Jessica had a tweet talking about the recent border shooting, and mentioned, oh, this is Ophelia. I was warning Ophelia about staying away from Ziz, and here's Ophelia's Twitter. And I was like, okay, that's weird. And then I clicked on it, and I had 15 mutuals in common with Ophelia. So I was like, oh, okay, so these are friends of mine that are, getting into shootouts with the Border Patrol and stuff. I was like, let me figure out what's going on. You know what I mean? Because that's just a because, the information really early on was just really, everyone was being very, from an outsider perspective, obviously there was a lot of crazy allegations and accusations going around, but also, I wasn't really convinced that the Zizians were a cult. It didn't seem like there was enough evidence to support that. And then, so I was just trying to read the blog, which was very, very fascinating. Because obviously, back when I was working at Walmart, like I was telling you about, I went to YouTube and I searched Unabomber, and it auto-completed audiobook manifesto. Because it knew exactly what I wanted. And, I did read Kaczynski's manifesto, and it is fascinating. And it is, a very seemingly internally coherent piece of writing that only necessarily falls apart if you look at his real-life actions and kind of notice how they don't really match up that well to how logical he was on paper. And I feel like part of the sort of Zizian saga that I'm noticing is that, not that their actions are totally inconsistent with their ideology so much as it is, as, these people seem to be really smart and interesting and fascinating on paper. And then, when it comes to the real-life crimes, or alleged crimes, they seem a little bit less thought through. So,
the Zizians had a border shootout. Can you tell us a little bit more about them as I don't know if you want to call them a cult, but them as an organizational structure?
Right. So, do you want me to, give you, the whole story, top to bottom, or just
sure.
the... Okay.
Maybe an abridged version first, and then maybe we can go into some bigger...
We'll try and do, a 10-minute version, basically.
Great.
Okay. So, basically, Ziz, or Jack Lasoda, was intern at NASA, comes from Alaska, goes to the Bay Area to work on AI safety. I think a really important part of the well, not to work on AI safety, but generally for that kind of cause, because that's where the Bay Area is where a lot of these discussions were happening and organizations were. I just learned she actually was giving money, I believe, to CFAR, the Center for Applied Rationality, which is an AI safety organization that will come up later. So Ziz goes to the Bay Area and is met with a lot of sort of difficulties regarding living situations. Like she writes in her blog about like having altercations with like landlords and things like this, and sort of bouncing around and having sort of a chaotic, tumultuous time figuring out where to live, which eventually ends with her getting, I believe, a boat, and then upgrading that boat and living with Gwen, who she met at the Rationality meetups. And I think they start blocking and living off of this a boat called the Caleb after they drive it down from Alaska. Do you drive boats? They sail it down from Alaska. But then things really get sort of kickstarted when they protest a CFAR alumni reunion, because they had come to believe that CFAR and or Miri had paid off a former employee who had sexual misconduct allegations, and they sort of lumped that in with transphobic allegations against them as well. I have no idea, like, the legitimacy of these accusations. It's not something I've really looked into, but they protested at the campsite, which is CFAR was holding an event for.
So they were protesting because they were on the employees' side, or they were on CFAR's side? Or they believe that, yeah. They're protesting exactly?
Right, so basically they took a big issue, not necessarily with the sexual misconduct, but with paying out of a blackmail payment as they saw it. Because in the Zizians sort of like frame of mind, it's if you sort of have this like, I guess, decision structure or whatever, where you're like, well, I'm going to do the right thing unless somebody applies a lot of force to me, then I'm going to sort of give in and give them what they want. Then basically you're just incentivizing people to apply a lot of force to you, which doesn't really make sense to a lot of people in the context of being adults. But I think if you consider it as like a child having a relationship with a parent, that makes more sense. Because, if you're like, it's like, okay, well, go to bed, and you're like, no, and they're like, okay, well, as a parent, I'm just going to sort of keep upping the ante and make you do this, then, you're just, by being like a sort of obstinate child with an obstinate parent, you're just sort of incentivizing them to escalate. And that's speculation. I don't know, like, a few of the Zizians have sort of been open about, like, having abuse at the home, but it doesn't seem to be the norm, and I don't want to speculate.
I'm confused as to how that relates to the sexual misconduct. Like, how does the escalation relate to the sexual misconduct accusations?
So the sexual misconduct accusations, basically they interpreted or somehow came to the belief that the CFAR or Miri paid off an employee of theirs to sort of keep the allegations quiet, which was, they interpreted as paying out to blackmail, which is, in their words, quote, paying a blank check to evil, and sort of sending a beacon that, we're going to, if you make up lies or truths about us, then we are going to give you money. So then, they sort of assume that, like, a lot of the world is full of evil people who are just looking for prey to exploit and things like this. So, and because CFAR and Miri are sort of addressing, in their minds, the most important problem in both CFAR and the Zizians' mind, which is the fact that AI may destroy the world, which is just sort of like the assumption that almost everyone involved in this story has, in terms of like being just connected to this scene, is, the AI may destroy the world, and we need to think rationally and logically and philosophically about this in order to have a chance of stopping it. So... This is sort of, and then, so in their minds, the organizations that they were trying to join and that they were like donating to and that they felt was extremely important in terms of saving the world was doing the worst thing that they can imagine, which is just being a pushover when it comes to evil people applying leverage over you, or just anybody applying leverage over you. So that's what sort of led them to this protest. And they showed up in body armor and Guy Fawkes masks, wearing all black, passing out flyers, I think maybe chanting, and they blocked the entrances and exits. And according to Octavia, who is someone who is pro-Zizian, I think it's fair to say, and sort of supports, I guess, some of their ideas and is very skeptical about the, I guess, official narrative of how involved these people are in the crimes, but is also, to be clear, Octavia is not involved in any of the criminal activities or anything. Octavia was never there in person. Octavia didn't drop off the map like a lot of these people, the Zizians, did. So, I feel like Octavia does have an account that is pretty pro-Zizian and sort of steelmanning for them, but is not necessarily, quote-unquote, one of them, depending on how you look at it. But Octavia said that they were basically trying to prevent people from coming in, but since they were late, they sort of trapped people there. And those people involved like a dozen or so children from a previous event who just hadn't left the campgrounds yet. So the CFAR people were not afraid of them, I don't think. Everything that I've heard from people who were there was like they knew the Zizians were probably going to protest. They knew this was coming. They were not afraid of them. They had no reason to believe that anything would be violent, just obnoxious. However, the camp staff did not, and so the camp staff called the police per the 911 incident report, and then they explained them the situation so that they may have a weapon, and then it appears there was a second 911 phone call which said that they did have a weapon per the police officer who responded to the scene. I think I was just reading a Wired article where he sort of goes into that.
How many Zizians were at the protest?
So there were 4. It was Emma, Somni, Gwen, and Ziz.
Okay,
and
great.
There was rumors of like a 5th person, and the police sort of searched for a 5th person, but that turned out to be a maintenance man who was just carrying a hatchet because he was worried about, things getting violent, but they interpreted that as being a separate protester and searched, called in like a helicopter and stuff, but that was just, it was just those 4. Yep. And, they arrest them, and there's like allegations from the Zizians of police brutality and sexual assault during that. That was a court case, and then that was dropped, so it's difficult to say, as a bystander, just sort of trying to sift through information, how legitimate that was. But it is true that they were a SWAT team, they were called, and that I think even in the police account, they did sort of take them down and put handcuffs on them in a rough way, which is, which the police see as justified given the situation. But then, the Zizians who had a little bit more information about the level of weapons did not. And so they get put in jail. They have like pretty serious charges that get dropped, or not dropped, but they get downgraded fairly soon. Emma gets bailed out really quickly because she worked at Google and had money, and I don't think the other 3 did, at least at this point. So, but then, the other 3 get bailed out too, and the charges get reduced. And then basically what happens is that, what happens pretty soon after that is Zizians.info is published, which is a anonymous article sort of who call them Zizians, who identifies Ziz as a leader, and calls them a cult. And these are like the first time any of those 3 things happened. And all that kind of stuck. It's not obvious to me that at this point they were really acting as a group, and if they were a group, that Ziz would have been considered the leader. I think, in more recent times, it does seem like Ziz is one, like, sort of calling the shots or being the most sort of, like, high-status person, and that, like, that they were sort of seeming to operate as a group more. But at that point, it's not clear. But yeah, that's my 10 minutes. I barely got started.
Don't worry, keep going.
Okay, so, then they So they kind of become persona non grata in the rationalist community, and this is part, and that along with their tugboat sort of starting to sink and become dilapidated, means that they're living in box trucks. And then when one of their friends, Kurt Lind, says that he's moving to a lot and that he's going to open a lot so that people can park their RVs there for like a sort of like the artist community, I believe was the intention, because he was also seasteading, living out of a boat, and sort of quit around the same time that they quit. So they're like, oh, well, we'll move in with you, and you could be the landlord, and we'll pay you rent, which only lasted until COVID hit, which was just a few months later. And then they're like, oh, well, Gavin Newsom said there's a eviction moratorium, so we're not going to pay you rent, and there's nothing you can do about it. And they were right, and they basically lived there for a few years, not paying rent. During this time, Ziz and Gwen both faked their deaths. Ziz, by just having her friends call the Coast Guard and say, hey, Ziz fell off a boat. The Coast Guard searched. Coast Guard can't find her. Coast Guard does not issue death certificates because it's so easy to fake with a, hey, my friend fell overboard type story like this, most likely. But there was an obituary ran, and her lawyer in court was saying that, yeah, this is, my client is probably dead. Gwen just left a suicide note and then disappeared and was considered to be a bit more sketchy. Her lawyer did not want to move forward with the legal proceedings sort of that you do when somebody dies. And then,
so they were in court because of the protest?
They were in court both because of the protest, but they were also countersuing CFAR, I think Westminster Woods, and the police. So they were countersuing based on the mistreatment of them. And I think that's where the court documents are for in particular. But they were
and what
also...
what is Westminster
Woods is the campsite where they protested at. Right. So then basically not too soon after that, there was this altercation with the landlord. And there's a lot of contested facts here, but basically what happens is that there's an altercation between the landlord and the Zizians. It seems in both sides' accounts, they both suspect violence is coming. There's a 911 call at like 2 a.m., but then the altercation doesn't happen until closer to 7 a.m., because that's when the police get there. The Zizians, and basically it's Kurt Lind, who's the 80-year-old landlord, and the Zizians. At this point, he had already gotten he had already basically been granted the legal right to evict them. He won a judgment against them in the Superior Court of Solano County. And, they owed him back rent, but it's hard to enforce that. And then it seems like pretty soon after that, when they were going to be ready to be evicted, is when this altercation happened. Curlin carried a firearm, which according to him, he bought because he was, afraid of these people. And, that's not something I can verify because the exact dates of gun purchases in California are not public information, but the police would be able to, I guess, double check that. But basically, according to Kurt, he, Suri Dow, who has not appeared in the story yet, told him that they needed to have him fix their water, so he goes in underneath the sink, and then when he's on his hands and knees, they attack him with a samurai sword and knives. And he loses his right eye in the altercation and gets stabbed through with the samurai sword, where it's protruding out of his chest, with the sharp end pointing in front of his chest. So he was stabbed in the back with that, which does lead me to believe that would be the type of attack where you do if someone was on their hands and knees, rather than if they initiated the altercation, in which case you would probably just swing it at their head. Especially if you're not trained. And it would be
from the front. It would be from the front. I mean, stabbing someone in the back is generally considered an offensive move. Yes. And,
it's not like hard and fast evidence. It does lead me to believe that. Octavia mentioned that, samurai swords are extremely lethal, and it would really, be difficult to not kill someone if you were having premeditated murder and jumping an 80-year-old man. But it's really, but basically, Kurt Lind, according to him, gets back on his feet, and he shoots them in self-defense. Somni survives, I believe because she may be wearing a bulletproof vest, per Octavia, which she bought because she was worried about an altercation leading up to it, per Octavia.
The 80-year-old man got stabbed through the chest. and lost an eye. They don't make them like they used to. That's old. That's
He
that
also
old
lived.
man farmer. Yeah. That's that like
Yeah.
old farmer strength, man. That's crazy. Okay, good on him.
It must be. It is very it is very surprising. I had to, when I was familiarizing with myself with the case to begin with, I was like, wait a minute. He survived? They stabbed him all the way through with the samurai sword and he survived? Like,
Holy shit.
but anyways, so he fires back. He injures Somni. He kills Emma, who was the one who had worked at Google and was also at the protest. And then it seemed like that they didn't realize that he was out of bullets, so he left and had his friend call the police. And then the police came. The police find Ziz, who gives a other name, and they put Ziz in handcuffs. But then Ziz fakes a medical emergency and goes to the hospital, and then is just not never seen, but then escapes. And then they arrest Suri and Somni for felony murder of Emma and attempted murder of Kirtland. And then the next day, Gwen is spotted picking up her belongings from the place by and this is like told to Gwen's lawyer from a Pennsylvania state trooper, which I don't know why. Pennsylvania does come in later, but I don't know how this Pennsylvania state trooper is like how the lawyer didn't, just say, hey, where did you hear that from? Let me talk to that person, especially considering it's whether or not one of his clients is alive. But I guess it's not my place to judge. But yes, so Gwen is also later confirmed to have been alive by her father, who says that she is now on the run from the Zizians in fear of her life from the other Zizians, and that he last spoke to her during the holidays. So
Sorry, so when did Gwen fake her death around the same time as Ziz, or is that a separate?
yes, so Gwen faked it in April of
Okay.
22, and Ziz faked it in September of 22, and then this altercation happens in November of 22.
Okay,
So it
great.
seems like after they faked their death, they were still living on Kirtland's lot. And he was saying that there was around
Okay.
8 to 10 people there at all times. And there was constantly people coming and going, that he didn't recognize them. And I don't think, knew anything about the court case or their fake deaths. So he wasn't.
And
like,
when did the protest happen?
protest happened in November of 2019?
2019. Okay, so in the 3 years,
Yeah.
they've kind of gained 4 more kind of big, like, central members, and then it sounds like they have kind of more friends coming and going as well.
Right. So in 2019 there was 4 people at the protest in 2019, and then I think some of them, if not all of them, moved into Kirtland's lot at the just a few months later in 2020, and then they stay there for a few years, and then they fake their deaths in 2022 when it seems like the case about the protest really sort of starts to kick off, and then November of 2022 is when they have this altercation.
Okay. Yep.
But yeah, and that's basically the end of Gwen's story. She's still out there. Maybe she might appear. I know she is still technically wanted for skipping bail in the protest case, but is more likely just concerned about the Zizians, if her father is to be believed. And then just a few months later, in December, on New Year's Eve, Jamie's parents are murdered. Now, Jamie hasn't appeared in the story yet. She is sort of like in online communications. She was living 30 miles south of the other Zizians, and then moves to Vermont. Her family's from Pennsylvania, and then she was living in Northern California in the Bay Area at some point, but then she's I know she buys land in Vermont at some point, and then she's living in Vermont when these murders happen. And basically on her birthday, which is New Year's Eve, 2 people, the ring camera footage shows 2 people, like a car pulling up, 2 people going inside, somebody saying, allegedly, although this is disputed, saying, Mom, calling out to Mom, where are you? And then saying, oh my God, 2 people leave, and then this is the night where the Zykos are murdered, which are Jamie's parents. The police,
Okay, sorry. A car pulls up on the camera.
Yeah.
There's 2 people.
Mm-hmm.
2 people get out of the car,
Yeah.
and then someone
Yes.
says "Mom." And then does Jamie have any siblings?
So she does not. They go inside,
Okay.
and then you hear through the neighbors, across the street, ring camera. You hear somebody saying, "Oh my god," and I think at least one somebody yelling "Mom." But there's.
Do we know how long they're in there for?
It says just a few minutes. I'm sure like they have like a exact timing, but just in the span of I don't know, maybe 10 minutes ish.
And how were they killed? The parents.
They were killed by gunshot wounds.
So the Ring camera didn't pick up gunshot sounds?
If it did, it wasn't published in the papers.
Okay.
I don't want to get this wrong, but I believe there is some sort of blog post about Ziz advising Jamie to kill. Well, no, it's like, I think. Let me put like a heavy asterisk and a legend next to this, but there is, I think, some sort of story of Ziz telling someone to kill someone and using a potato as a makeshift suppressor, and then dissolving bodies in lye. And lye was found at the Kirtland residence, which he believes meant that they're going to try and kill him and then dissolve his body in lye.
Okay. That's interesting. I don't know. That's a bit odd. I mean, I don't know how well potatoes work as makeshift suppressors, but guns are pretty loud, right? Like, if you're hearing someone saying "mom" and "oh my god," then it's like, I don't know if you're probably hearing a gunshot. I'm sure, but anyway, I don't know.
I would assume
gotta,
so as well.
Yeah, at some point. I mean, I'd love to see you like. I don't know if you can ask the neighbors or get a Freedom of Information Act.
It's an ongoing court case, so most likely not.
You probably can't, yeah.
Well, not a court case. It's an ongoing investigation. There haven't been any charges brought against anybody with regards to this. Although there is a $10,000 reward that the Pennsylvania police told me about, where if you bring information that leads to an arrest in these murders, you can be awarded $10,000.
That's not enough. They've killed a bunch of people. Should be a little more. Come on, guys. Add an extra zero.
That's a good point. That's a good point. But then, also somebody disputed whether or not the person actually says "mom." Somebody who had seen the footage talked to a newspaper and said that they were not convinced that that is the word that was said. But at any rate, then the police go. They pay Jamie a visit. She's in Vermont. She said she hasn't spoken to her parents in months, which is not true because they found a signal message talking about some money thing. And then she was like, "Oh yeah, I forgot about that." They figure out that she has a gun, and the state trooper holds it, and they look up the kind of gun, and it is a possible match for the ballistics, so it would be consistent with it, but it's not like a fingerprint type ballistics as far as I understand. Like other guns with the same caliber could have produced the shells that were found at the scene, but it could be used for that. So they get a warrant, and they go back, and she's not in her house anymore, but they confiscate some ammo, and then they figure out that she's in a hotel. And they go to the hotel, and according to Wired, I think, I just read this article just before our interview, but according to Wired, they knock on the door, and they tell her, "We have a warrant, we're coming in to search for this alleged possible murder weapon that you own," and she was sort of not opening the door super fast, so they use the card key to get in, and then they detain her. And then they bring her downstairs, and then she shouts to the hotel staff to tell her friend that she's being arrested. He's like, he's in room 111. And then the cops are like, "Oh, you have a friend in room 111? Okay, let's go pay him a visit." So they go pay him a visit, and it's Daniel Blank. Daniel Blank says to come back with a warrant. So they do. They get a warrant from a judge, and then they search the room. And it was like booked under the name Daniel Black, not Daniel Blank. And they find Daniel, who is cooperative with the police. And then they also find Ziz. And a little bit about Daniel Blank. This is sort of the first time he's brought up.
Wait, one sec. So he says, "Come back with a warrant," and then he doesn't get rid of anything. He doesn't get rid of Ziz. He doesn't tell him to leave. He just stays in the same place.
Yeah, so I don't know how soon they were able to secure that warrant. I know that in situations like this, it might be faster than you would expect.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
I don't know. It's like, this was also the dead of night around midnight. Which is
it could
why
also
I
be
believe,
watching the hotel, seeing who comes and goes or something. All right, fair enough.
Yeah, and if you leave, then, they can, like having a room that you're staying in, it requires a warrant. And, you also, I believe, need a warrant to search a person, but if you have, I think maybe probable cause makes it different. I don't know. I'm not a legal expert, but
sure.
Yeah, so they stay in place. They get a warrant, they come right back, and then they, enter in. And Daniel Blank at this point had already had his last piece of contact with his friends and family and anybody who knew him. He was missing for a long time, until basically this week, and a lot of people were sort of theorizing that the Zizians had killed him because they found it really hard to believe that he is a Zizian, but it does seem like he is, it does seem like he is a Zizian based on, things that have come to light after he's been arrested. But, his parents last placed him, as like, the last contact they had with him was in December, which was like about a month beforehand at this point, and, people who worked with him, things like that.
And just to, this is a tangent, right? But I know that the Zizians were like, a lot of them were trans. Are every single one of these people trans?
So Daniel Blank is not trans.
Okay, yeah. And you're using the pronouns that people prefer.
Yes,
Audera is not trans. So okay, yeah. So you're using the pronouns that people prefer. So, yep. Okay.
Right, yeah.
Yep. But almost everyone else. Okay, great. Cool.
Yes, there's a few, like Milo, who will come in later, and Jamie, where it's not incredibly clear to me what pronouns that they're currently using. And Suri, at first I thought was male to female trans, and then turns out was possibly female to male trans. But I believe from their lawyer is going by they them now, at least in court proceedings. So there's a lot of changing of the pronouns and a lot of the changing in the reporting of the pronouns. So
Right.
I'm trying to be respectful, but it's confusing for a lot of people. So
me included.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, cool. So Daniel Blank is
Daniel Blank is a cis male.
Yeah. Okay. So so back to the story. Did you say he was arrested or?
He was not. He cooperated with police, and then after this, he basically dropped off the map and disappeared, until like really recently. Ziz is found on the bathroom floor with her eyes closed, completely motionless. They have to get 4 officers to carry her out. They're worried that she might be having a medical emergency, so they take her to a hospital, and the hospital determines that no, she isn't. She's just been extremely uncooperative. So they book her for obstruction. They book her for obstruction, and then she gets put in jail with, I think they have fingerprints that pop up that she has some sort of active warrant, but I guess it didn't realize that included skipping bail, so during, she gets put in custody, and then, I'm not sure if they actually find the weapon they were looking for in the search. That's something where the police have not deigned to clarify, and I think I've heard conflicted reports from different news articles, so that's something I'm working on clarifying right now. But they also find like $40,000 in cash under Jamie's car seat. So, and Jamie has money. Throughout this whole story, her parents are landlords, and at least one sort of anonymous rumor says that they were millionaires, and Jamie has a lot of land and does a lot of big purchases for things like that. Then what happens next? So then, Ziz is put in jail, awaiting bail, for just obstruction charges. And then in July of 23, Ziz's mother goes to court and says, hey, I'll make sure she shows up for her court date if you let her on a bail. And the judge says, good enough for me, and cuts the bail from $500,000 down to $10,000 unsecured. So Ziz walks out without paying a cent.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is an interesting part because Ziz faked her own death to get out of going to jail, and then skipped bail.
Yes.
And then they said, you faked your own death, but I'm sure you won't do it a second time.
It's not clear if they even knew about that, but everyone on the internet did. So it would sort of be, just...
Someone dropped the ball there. Multiple people dropped the ball. Somewhere along the line.
It's definitely fair to say that. Like, this is like... Faking your death to skip bail seems like it should be a red flag, but I guess,
Yep.
Who knows?
Okay.
There's a more. Oh yeah, so Adair comes into the scene at this point. He's going to Oxford, although that might have just been online, and he is around the area of the University of Washington, where he's dating Milo, and because they went to high school together.
So he's an Oxford University student.
Yeah. Yes, it might be online,
Okay.
but yes, he is. Yeah.
Yeah. That's some very intelligent people are involved in this this ring.
Oh yeah, and I haven't spent like too much time on it, but Emma worked at Google. Sis had the internship at NASA. Ophelia, who will come up later, was, I believe, like working as a quantitative analyst on Wall Street. I believe, like really, really smart, really high achieving, really intelligent people we got here.
Yeah. Cults actually don't seem to attract particularly stupid people. I mean, they do, but it's across the spectrum. Like, stupidity isn't the main correlation for what gets people involved in a cult,
right.
Which is interesting to me. But go on. Sorry.
No, yeah, you're right. So what happens now? So Adair was raising money via crypto to try and get Ziz out on bail. And this is Proctavia, who's working with him to help him. This, doesn't necessarily go anywhere because Ziz is let out without paying a cent, which I don't think people realized until recently. But, so after Ziz gets out on bail, then a few things kind of start to happen, sort of behind the scenes, where there's this house in North Carolina, where Milo and Ophelia moved to. And this is sort of like Ophelia's really first appearance. Ophelia is a German national and flew into Pennsylvania shortly before the Zyko murders, per the police. It's not clear whether that's relevant, but she is mentioned as a person of interest in that case. And so Ophelia and Milo move in together in North Carolina. They have a box truck out in front, and someone's living there. And I think also maybe another third person is living in one of their houses. I think they were like living close to each other, but not in the same place, I don't think. But around this time, Ophelia, Adair, and Milo all start to sort of change and drop contact with a lot of their online friends and family. I think Milo is even reported as missing, and the parents said that it was something like they were like afraid she was with a abusive boyfriend or something like that, which would have been Adair. And then at this point, after they all sort of go ghost and no one really hears anything from them, on election day of 2024, Milo and Adair file a marriage license, which is not clear whether they actually did get married, but they file it then. And then in January of this year, we have a few events, which is the Border Patrol shootout. First, which is, actually I don't think it happens first. I think what happens first is that Adair allegedly murders Kirtland in broad daylight because the trial for Surian Somni...
That's the 80-year-old?
Yes, the landlord.
Okay. Oh, poor guy.
This is like years afterwards. It is not a... the details of how he was murdered are not pretty. It was with a knife. But so, it's in broad daylight. It doesn't seem like he was wearing facial coverings. So, and Adair was arrested on suspicion of murder. If it is Adair, it seems like it would be a pretty open and shut case because it was in front of multiple witnesses who can all identify him. But, innocent until proven guilty. And he was booked, like, a few days later, or maybe a week later, I believe. And then in Vermont, Ophelia and Milo are checking into a hotel. They're looking to purchase property. The realtor kind of describes them as acting a little bit weird, wanting to pay in cash, wanting, things to move really fast. And, wearing face masks, kind of being weird. At one point, I think there was, like, some hunters on a piece of property or whatever that they were looking at and they were like, hey, who are you? And they kind of got a little paranoid and said the house wasn't going to work. They need a new house and they need it fast. And then the realtor kind of got spooked. And then the hotel people got spooked by them as well because they were wearing face masks and body armor and open carrying. All of which is legal, but it just sort of, with the sort of standoff personality, sort of creates suspicion and fear in the general populace. So they call the FBI, and then the FBI kind of starts to track them. At some point, the FBI passes this off to Border Patrol, and it's not super clear to me when or why, besides the fact that Ophelia is a German national, but so at some point, federal agents observe them, they try and talk to them, and they're like, we don't want to talk to you. I'm like, okay. And then they observe them going to a Walmart, coming back with aluminum foil, and then wrapping objects in their car in aluminum foil, which later turned out to be laptops and phones. And then they follow them and they pull them over. The reason for the stop is a suspicion of expired visa, which is a pretty, obviously, just kind of bullshit excuse. Like, they were being stopped because they were being suspected of terrorism. And I don't know why the FBI passed this off to the Border Patrol, or even how much communication to the Border Patrol about the situation was given. But the Border Patrol pulls them over. Milo starts to get aggravated and allegedly pulls out a gun and shoots and kills a Border Patrol officer. Wow. They return fire, and they kill Ophelia, who also went for a weapon after this started, and injure Milo, who has survived and is currently in custody on trial awaiting this. Then, and then the last thing that happened...
Another real dropped ball by the government there, the FBI handing that over to the Border Patrol. The Border Patrol, I don't think, are equipped to handle... They knew that they were open carrying.
Maybe on
and they
the
had
southern
bulletproof
border.
Vests.
Yeah. Maybe on the southern border, they would be a little bit more, I guess, prepared for that sort of thing. You don't necessarily think of Canadian border, patrolling the Canadian border as being something that violent. Now, that's not necessarily my place to say. I'm sure there's, reasons for everything, right? It does seem like a cluster a little bit. I don't know why. That it seems like a little bit unnecessary. But
do they have a shootout with Canadian agents or American agents?
No, American agents. I was just saying that the Border Patrol close to the Canadian border is not an agency that's really prepared for that much violence. At least based on my civilian understanding, at least.
Okay. All right.
But anyways, they then, this is where things kind of start to pop off on the internet. And then recently, last week, there was, they arrested Ziz. Oh, and Jamie had bought the weapons that were used in the shootout. So that's how Jamie got connected to that. And she bought them, I think, a year before. And when and then, so, after sort of federal attention starts to get brought to this case, there's a federal manhunt in North Carolina. Well, I say manhunt, I don't know if they searched the Airbnbs where they were staying, and were just saying they were looking for an item, but declined to specify anything beyond that. And then, it seemed pretty obvious that the feds were looking for these people, and, the prosecution and the various proceedings are sort of bringing up and sort of saying, hey, these individuals are all connected to a bunch of other murders and things like that, so we should treat them as a group. And it seems to be generally accepted by the court because bail is not being given anymore. And then Ziz, Jamie, and Daniel Blank are all apprehended, living out of the back of the box truck. And they pulled up to this campground, and they said, we want to camp here. And the guy said no. And then they were like, whoa. And then they refused to leave. So he called the police. The police arrest them. And then they realize that they're wanted for this, on a federal level. So then, none of them, they're all being held without bail. But Ziz and Jamie are being held on weapons charges, and all three of them are being held on trespassing and obstruction. So, but yeah, and that's basically what takes us today. That was way longer than 10 minutes, but...
Amazing. Sorry. Okay. No, don't be sorry. That was great. That was fantastic.
Okay.
So, yeah. So the Zizians, what united them? What was their shared ideology, their shared beliefs?
That's a good question. I'm still trying to unravel that as I read the blog and kind of wrap my head around it. It's not easy reading, and it's sort of convoluted and not. It doesn't make an attempt to make itself necessarily understandable to people who aren't familiar with like the terminology, and a lot of it is hyperlinked to like, and it has a glossary, but even within that glossary, in order to explain certain terms, it links back to other articles. So you can really find yourself just sort of like walking in circles in this sort of maze of language, and only really understanding articles like 50 to 70% at a time. But, I think the ideology, it's definitely veganism. That is one thing that every single one of these people has in common. And a sort of understanding of game theory or decision theory, which is partially what I talked about before in terms of, giving into blackmail is like writing a blank check to evil and certain things like that.
Dude,
So,
I've met a lot of crazy vegans. I don't know. There's something about long-term veganism. I don't think it's good for your brain. I have no evidence to support this, except vitamin B12 deficiency does kind of fuck you up. But like, I have met an overwhelming amount of fucking mentally disturbed vegans, and I think there's something to it.
no comment.
Ken's part of the Vegan National Coalition.
Absolutely not. I like chicken nuggets too much.
Yeah.
Although I will say, a lot of the claims against factory farming do like make sense to me.
Absolutely.
Like, that's not.
Yeah. We shouldn't be torturing animals. Like that's not good for anyone. And honestly, even without the animal ethics thing, does anyone actually think that eating tortured animals that have been raised in livestock farms is going to be like good for you? Like all that stress and all this it's going to be, it's just bad karma. You're eating bad juju.
Yeah.
Luckily in Australia, like all of our animals, I don't know about all of them, but like we don't really have stock farming for cattle. They're all like free range because we have so much space.
Oh,
and
yeah,
then like
that makes sense.
Yeah. We have caged chickens, but like I don't think we have caged chickens anymore. I think we only have barn and then free range. So like we're doing pretty well. We're doing fine. I think our animals are less kind of fucked up than other people's, but
Okay. I want to say that Adair Link referenced a documentary about factory farming and animal cruelty that actually was from Australia.
Yeah.
So the Zizians may disagree with you, but
maybe
I don't.
Very possibly.
There's a lot
Very
that I
possibly.
don't understand about factory farming and veganism anyway. So
My husband actually used to work in a slaughterhouse.
really,
And yeah, Elliot. And he said that I think one time they filmed a documentary. Oh, I don't know. He was saying that like, so one thing that he was telling me was that like chickens who get their heads cut off or when they die, or maybe they don't get their heads cut off, but after they die, they have a reflexive response where they still flap their wings, and then they're hung up. And he was saying that there was this one documentary saying that like the chickens were still alive and they were being hung up and like tortured in this way, like strung up on hooks or something. Mm-hmm. But actually they were just dead and having a reflexive response because that's what happens after chickens die.
Yeah.
And so there was
the expression running around like a chicken with its head cut off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, same thing. But so it seemed like there was some. Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, factory farming is terrible, even if it's in Australia. Like, I'm sure we have our practices that shouldn't be done, but I don't know, free-range animals that have had a good life, like, death has to happen at some point. I don't know. I mean, it's not ideal, but, like, vegans don't seem okay, so. Anyway, back to the scheduled program. Okay, so they were into veganism. Were they into EA at all, effective altruism?
Yes, especially I believe earlier on, it would definitely had influences on how I think, especially from like there's a lot of utilitarian language, and I think I was talking with Octavia because one of the claims made in Zizians.info that turned out to be not provably, but pretty definitively false, was that he was saying that they were influenced a lot by one particular utilitarian. And Octavia was sort of making the point that they were influenced by utilitarian in general, and that there was really no mention of this guy, and if there was any sort of one thing, it would have been like these other few people. But yeah, and I believe EA also has a lot of overlap with ethical veganism and just other utilitarian ways of looking at the world, which is, I believe, something that is part of their ideology. Yeah.
Yeah, I see. I see.
I want to say
So,
that some of them were doing the earn to give thing, especially those with more higher paying jobs. I think maybe Ophelia and maybe Emma. But don't
good
quote
for
me.
them. You know, I'm giving what we can. It's good.
Yeah.
That's when you. It's when you give 10% of all your wealth. They make a pledge to give 10% of all their wealth for their lifetime, which is a very noble thing to do. So, do you have any idea of what they're? I mean, so what united them? Like they were. A lot of them were trans, for instance. They were vegan. They had this utilitarian bent. Do you know anything about the practices they did, like how they did outreach, anything like that?
That's a good question. It seems they were not extremely aggressive about outreach. It seems like they were like even from the very beginning, blogs are sort of like, especially in Silicon Valley, are sort of like a point of like discussion and debate. So it's sort of, I think some of them had less wrong accounts. This was sort of, they would write articles and quote it. Well, actually, I don't know if they did that. But it was sort of like just all part of a sort of like established debate space, right? And even after, I think certain people were like on the run or faking their death, they were still hanging out in certain like private Discord servers and things like that. And I think that's probably how people like out there got involved. It's really hard to say, because these things are just sort of like who's talking to who, and it's probably happening in a lot of just like sort of private chat rooms. But there's it's not super clear, but I do know that a lot of people just sort of expressed a, I guess, intellectual interest in their ideas, and then that sort of like was like the beginning point. And then because I think like Jessica was saying, yeah, Ophelia was sort of interested in these ideas and like the fact that like they might be true, and so was Adair, and then that sort of like led to them getting more involved later. So it's sort of like it is weird because there's very, if you could call it a cult, there's very few cults that sort of seem to make an intellectual case that is not even necessarily something that is a comforting belief. I think a lot of cults are like, if you believe it, you can understand why it'd be, the meaning, at least, would be comforting. Well, I mean, that's actually not true. Ziz did think, I think, Celine, who was groomed by Adair, which is sort of, not part of the super central story, but she was saying that, Adair, that the damaging part in her mind was not the sexual nature of the relationship so much as the sort of belief that she was one of the, like, 10,000 most important people in the world per Adair, and that, what she did had a lot of importance in terms of the weight of the world and saving the world and things like that. So I think that you could say that that's part of it. But also, like, there is a very intellectual aspect to this. Like, people have said, oh, the blog is designed to make you insane, and that's just not true. If you read the blog and really, it's hard to read, but if you read it and, like, wrap your head around it, there are very real ideas there that do seem to be at least somewhat internally consistent, as far as I can tell. And it is, like, an internally consistent, valid ideology, more so than something like Mormonism would be,
Mm-hmm. Okay. Can you there's a couple avenues I want to go on. One of them is Squirrel in Hell. Do you know much about that person and what happened?
A little bit. So, Squirrel in Hell, aka Maya Pasek, was an early corresponder with Ziz. Happens even before the protests, really, I think around like 2017-ish. And she's from Poland, she was trans, and she had like correspondence. She was also a paranoid person. In Ziz's description of their correspondence, she says how Maya was like advise her to go on like different I think used different laptops or different this or different that because she was worried that they were being tapped and monitored, which is, you know, a running theme throughout this. There's in Jamie's residence in California before she moved back to Vermont. I say back to Vermont, back to the East Coast in Vermont. There was a butter dish with a label maker that had the label, assume this phone is tapped, 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 printed in all caps like 4 times, like Tumblr style, in the butter dish where she ostensibly kept a cell phone.
All right. Well, fair enough. Okay.
Which I think is pretty cool. It just is like something that I would want to have on the back of my phone, but
Yeah. For everyone to see as you're making phone calls. That's good.
yeah,
I like that.
yeah. But
It creates
basically-
mystery. Ladies love mystery.
Yeah. Who is this mysterious man with the tapped phone call? It's like, I never said it was tapped. I said you should assume it was tapped.
Yep.
But
Absolutely.
but so they were talking about different theories and sort of the intellectual theories they had at the time, and then Maya ended up committing suicide. Different people have attributed this to Ziz's influence. It's not clear how fair that is to me. It seemed like Maya was definitely someone who was troubled outside of this. What is sort of confirmed on all sides is that Maya and Ziz and Gwen introduced Maya to Gwen's sleep tech, which is described in Zizians.info as this sort of technique where you where you sort of deprive yourself of sleep and then close one eye, and then that part of your hemisphere will fall asleep and the other one won't. This is sort of like pushed back on pretty heavily by Octavia, saying that this is not an accurate description of how debucketing or the quote-unquote sleep tech works. There haven't been any public descriptions by Zizians saying how it does work, but, you know, he also in the same... the Zizians.info guy also attributed it to Ziz when Ziz and Gwen both attributed it to Gwen. So it seems like if he got some of those details wrong and he's the only source on how this is performed, it's certainly salacious and it is goofy. The idea that you're going to close one eye and that side of your brain's going to go to sleep and the other one won't, and that'll help you sort out which aspects of your personality correspond to which hemisphere. But, so that's like the craziest part of the story that's going to be floating out there, but I'm personally pretty skeptical that that's how Zizians would describe it being.
Okay.
Right.
Do we know if they used... And what is debucketing, by the way?
Debucketing is another word for sleep tech, aka just sort
Okay.
of like, I think in Ziz's words, sort of like removing the illusion that you are one self as opposed to the reality that you are two selves.
Okay, yeah. Because our brains are 2 hemispheres and they're kind of attached by like the corpus callosum, I guess. And so there's that idea that like there's if you kind of cut the brain in half, you have 2 different sometimes contradicting selves or selves that don't really communicate well, which is true.
Yeah.
Okay, so
And it is fair to say in this sort of space, sort of internally family systems, or a more like Jungian way of looking at yourself as multiple selves, is not crazy, and normal people, well-adjusted people who pay their taxes do this stuff. And it doesn't seem outrageous to me as someone who has, like, heard about that. The thing that is more unique to Zizianism is sort of saying that this is associated with the 2 different hemispheres of your brain.
yeah.
But yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, so basically Maya ends up killing herself, and it's attributed to Ziz. Ziz does seem to believe that she may have something to do with it in a remorseful kind of way. It's like she's not, she never wrings her hands publicly, but like just looking at it, I interpreted it as, being, now updating her beliefs about, hey, maybe this sleep tech is a little bit more dangerous. Maybe learning about some of this stuff that we were talking about can be emotionally or psychologically destabilizing for people, and so she starts to add trigger warnings where she previously had not believed in them and things like
In
that.
her
And writes
blogs?
about it. Yeah.
Okay. So she has so the Zizians.info, was that published by Ziz, do we think? Or is this
No.
a separate blog?
That was published by J.D. Pressman, who it was published anonymously, but Octavia, who was dating J.D. Pressman at the time, says that it was him and that she helped him with it. He is not wanting to deal with this publicly, it seems like, and did not respond to me reaching out for a comment. So, I'm not necessarily encouraging people to, like, go bug him about it or anything like that. But it does seem like it was by him, per Octavia, who was dating him at the time, who would know. And Octavia, because at the time Octavia was pretty anti-Ziz, and then later updated to be pretty pro-Ziz.
It sounds like you've been talking to Octavia.
We had, the first podcast about Zizians I did was with her, and we've been chatting a little bit afterwards, but not as in-depth as then.
Mm-hmm. And did she know the Zizians in person?
I don't think she ever met any of them in person. Well, if she did, like, it didn't come up. Because I was asking her, I was like, oh, were you in person for this? And but she was just sort of an online friend of theirs who's never really there in person. I think she lived in a different state at the time. Mm-hmm. That most of this stuff was going down, so.
Yeah. All right. And then I've seen some of the Zizian. So in the Zizian blogs, like there's. Sorry, what was Ziz's blog called? Did you mention it?
It was Sinceriously. Like a combination of sincere and seriously.
Yeah, okay.
Great name, by the way.
Yeah. And so it's still active. People can still check it out. And there's.
It was taken down, but there's a mirror hosted that somebody put up and also kind of made a little bit more work to make it a little bit more readable. And you can find the link in my Google Doc. This is in facts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we'll post that as well. And so I've heard that you are. Do you have any more information on the Zizians? Like, I'm kind of interested in like what their lifestyle was like when they were camping out on the artist.
I mean, not much is. Well, they were nudists. Neighbors described that they would walk around naked. There's always people kind of coming and going. They stuff that was found after they left was needles, some sort of ultrasonic machine, which could be like a bunch of different things. Because this is ID'd because right after the attack, Lynn hired a bodyguard, one of his friends, and the bodyguard is sort of describing this, and he describes a ultrasound machine. Now, ultrasound machines can be used to assist in intravenous injections, which would not be estrogen if that were the case, because estrogen, if injected, would be doing, I believe, into the muscles or somewhere else. I'm not a doctor, but there's also this other theory that they were using like ultrasounds to affect their brainwaves to experiment with that, which is pretty much debunked because the ultrasound tech friend that I have said that is not the kind of ultrasound that you can do with a home machine. Yeah. Somebody did bring up the fact that it may have been an ultrasonic bath, which is a type of vibrating machine where you fill it up with liquid and it cleans tools by vibrating the water when it's surrounded. And they hypothesized that could be used with the lye to dissolve body parts faster. This is all heavy speculation. We do know that lye was found there. We do know that some ultrasound or ultrasonic thing was there. It's.
I mean, I have one of those ultrasonic baths for jewelry.
Yeah.
And
okay.
It's very clear what it is. I mean, it's very clearly it is a bath shape, and I mean, unless this was like an ultrasonic machine that they had rigged together, they're gonna call it an ultrasonic bath. They're not gonna call it like it's not an ultrasound machine. It doesn't look like an ultrasound machine. I would be very surprised if they just
right. But this is like us bodyguards sort of talking about it, like, I believe probably years after the fact. So it was the sort of interpretation on a possible misinterpretation. But you're right. It is probably, it's not the most obvious guess that it would be an ultrasonic bath.
I'm hearing needles, I'm hearing ultrasound, and I'm kind of putting those two together. And I'm also hearing cult with interesting ideas, and it just sounds like they were doing meth or something. That's my bet. My best guess is meth. There's this category of meth drama that happens where once you do meth, you attract demons into your life, and then now your life is completely haunted by demons, and that's kind of what this sounds like. But what do I know?
It would sort of like make sense from an outsider's perspective. I've really not heard anything about any drugs. I want to say that even there's at least, I won't say because I really can't remember, but there's really no evidence of them doing any drugs aside from estrogen to medically transition, which I haven't really kept track of, but I believe a handful of them were maybe doing. But yeah, no, nothing like that.
Yep. Okay.
So
makes sense.
It would make things more understandable to the general public, I think, but it's just, like that's the thing, like Silicon Valley is like, not necessarily, I feel like that like the drugs of choice up there, like more closer to like nootropics or like microdosing mushrooms or like amphetamines, but like not not amphetamines, like stimulants. A stimulant is an amphetamine. I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, but it seems
but
it's
not
like a different
methamphetamines.
Right.
Yeah.
Like a different sort of culture, like, because they place a really high value on thinking clearly. So, and thinking well and thinking correctly. And, it would make sense that they would not want to do drugs that would sort of like maybe alter that or even have the reputation for altering that. And if they were, they would have probably blogged about it, and it doesn't seem like they blogged about that at all, so.
Okay, cool. Yep, good to know. Interesting. This is sounding a little bit... It's sounding a little bit Manson-esque, almost. This whole case.
It being compared to Manson a lot. I do want to say, though, that there's no connection to the CIA that I found at all. Even, like, off-the-record stuff. Like, they, there was a Tumblr post that was a pro-Zizian that was alleging that the neighbor who called the cops was ex-CIA, which is just totally unfalsifiable. But, there's a lot of evidence that Charles Manson was working for the CIA or somehow on their payroll. And, like, I think it's Tom O'Neill has a book called Operation Chaos that kind of gets into that. But, and there's a lot of really good evidence to suggest he was part of the MKUltra program. And here, it really doesn't seem like there's any evidence or influence of that at all. The closest thing you could find that would make this at all a little spooky is just Peter Thiel funding C4 and Miri at the beginning. But even again, that's not, that's so far removed from anything that's, like, relevant in my opinion.
It doesn't seem like they're really involved in C4 and Miri very much.
No, like, they would consider themselves enemies, probably, but, like, after the initial protests, it seems like they're, the evidence surrounding them, or the events surrounding them, just sort of move further and further away from anything related to that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, good to know. And it sounds like you have been contacted by some people wanting to make films about this. Is that correct?
Yes, that is true. I'm hoping to make a decision in a few days. I've taken a lot of phone calls from a lot of people who, and a lot of them seem to be really, at least on first meeting, seem to be wanting to treat this well, with like the, I guess, dignity and respect that the people involved deserve, which is good, but yeah, I'm gonna most likely help produce that documentary and be involved in like trying to make it happen and trying to make sure that we tell a good version of the story as it happened, so.
It's amazing. And I just found out before we started, you're in the film industry as well, right?
I am, yeah. I work as a sound guy, mostly as a boom operator, and mostly in the narrative side. So this will be a little bit of a career hop for me, but, I think it's something I'm going to be good at, and it's something I'm really excited to get started on, so.
Yeah, and being in the film industry is, you understand I think you probably have a big advantage in that you understand how things work as well. Yeah.
And to be clear, there's a lot that I still don't understand about how it works, but, I've been working in the business for quite a few years, and, I have friends in the business who I can say, hey, here's so-and-so, this is what they're telling me, blah, 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 blah. Like, someone was like, oh, these people, they're real, they have this reputation, things like that I feel like, set me up for success because, all everyone knows about the movie business is that it's dirty. and it is dirty.
Yes.
But there's it doesn't mean that you can't develop a sort of like skill or like sort of suss out people's reputations and get a feel for them based off talking to them and figure out who's good to work with and who isn't.
Absolutely.
Not
People have
not
reputations.
that there's like no risk, but But yeah, I know that that's something definitely that the community is probably really worried about in terms of like documentaries getting made and me being involved with documentaries. But it's been a long time since I've been surprised by my assessment of someone's character, in terms of just like how trustworthy they are and how much I can like trust them to mean what they say. So
it's a very valuable skill to have.
it really is, yeah. And I feel like it's kind of not super teachable, because I feel like so much of bad feelings about people is just sort of being like, they kind of remind me of this person who turned out to be untrustworthy a long time ago. That's weird. And then it turns out they were trustworthy, and I'm like, wait a minute, this is just like an archetype that they're like fitting into. But if like, I were to like tell you some of these archetypes, it would either be just sort of like too specific or too, I don't know, gut based or anything. It's not. And it's like the moment you identify as like, oh, this is the kind of thing that a shady person says, then the smart shady people just stop saying that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to, I guess, communicate. But I do think that I do think that in terms,
listening to your intuition is its own very powerful set of skills. It's incredibly hard to communicate, like you said. I think a lot of it is just trusting yourself, learning to trust yourself, and then also, I think some people, honestly, unfortunately, like I have a friend who was kind of raised. I have a few friends, who were just kind of raised in environments where they were told not to trust themselves, and they were like not given the ability to make their own decisions in a lot of ways, or like abused in different ways, and that just throws off your intuition. And so like you need you need to learn to recalibrate somehow, and like that takes time. But honestly, it's just, for me, it feels a lot like listening to myself. And then if I have a weird or a strange feeling about someone, just trusting myself and acting according to that.
Yeah. I think also like something about what you mentioned there about people just being told not to trust themselves. I feel like a lot of people have like really intuitive abilities, but they just don't believe that they have them, so they would never like utilize them. Like, like my favorite piece of dating advice is when I asked Darby, I was like, am I like, because she was like helping me. I had women's struggles in the past. I know, hard to believe as it is now, but I was asking her if it was okay to hit on waitresses, and she's like, you can hit on anyone you want, just stop if they don't like it. And I was like, I never thought about the fact that I could probably tell if they don't like it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
because it's so like I guess scary to fail at interpreting someone and saying, oh, I think this person wants me to hit on them, and then it turns out they don't. You feel really stupid, but that's but that doesn't mean that it's not a skill that you can't develop, right? If you just believe that you can like read minds and then try to read minds, you're gonna get better at reading minds, especially when people want you to kind of know what they're like putting out there energetically. So
reading bodies, reading body language, it's people usually tell you pretty, I mean, for me it seems pretty obvious almost all the time what people are kind of, especially when it comes to like flirting, like they're either receptive or they're not, and it's usually fairly clear. They're I think oftentimes young men have this they're very driven, like 18-year-old guys are very driven towards sex, and so it's like they have blinders on for everything else in the world. Not all the time, but a lot of the times. And so they're kind of just not really listening to all the signals that are coming across. But I think, especially as men get older and more mature, and maybe the testosterone drops a little bit, like they're able to, I mean, at least in my experience, like older guys who are more developed are able to see and feel a lot more signals that are going on. Which is, I think that's, Yeah, I think that's a big part of the consent conversation that people don't understand. Like, I'm way off track, but like that people don't really think about too
that's
much.
true. Yeah.
Like consent, like being like, hey, can I kiss you or can we have sex is like a super annoying and dumb thing to say unless you're one of those guys who has no fucking idea what's going on and you're like totally out of it and you just want to have sex, and then that's probably like, yeah.
So many guys want to be like, but I am one of the guys who just can't tell. And it's like, no, you're just afraid to guess wrong.
Interesting.
Like, yeah, it's like, I'm not the first person to tweet about this or, like, remark on this. But, guys are just like, oh, I'm just so stupid. I just can't tell when they're into me. And it's like, that's not true. You're just afraid to get it wrong. You're afraid to be humiliated. You're afraid to assume the wrong thing. So you're always just deciding. So you're not stupid. You're just deciding to assume the safe thing at all times.
Which is that they don't like you? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
They're assuming that they don't.
Yeah, because if you just always assume that a woman is just not into you, then you're never going to be humiliated by, like, acting on the assumption that she might be, right? Even if, like, if you had to bet $1 million of your own money, well, I mean, I'm assuming, if you had to bet like $1,000 of your own money on whether or not, and you couldn't not bet, then, a lot of guys would be betting that girls are into them a lot more. But they don't. But, in like day-to-day life, they're just like, oh, I'm just a stupid guy. I don't know any, women, I just don't get them, and then they're like, it's like, no, you're just a coward.
Yep, absolutely. It's true. And here's the thing, like, a lot of women, don't get hit on very much anymore because it's so much easier to swipe on Tinder for guys. And so like the guys who do go and hit on them and make it clear, and they're like brave. They're in the top 5 or 10% of men in terms of bravery and like willingness to put themselves out there. And that automatically gives you a massive leg up. Like automatically she's like, oh, he finds me attractive enough. He likes me enough to actually put himself out there when other guys won't. Like he must be really into me. He must be like a particularly brave guy. Like that's huge. It's worthy of respect. Even if she doesn't like you, I think oftentimes she'll respect you, which is huge because even if she isn't that into you, she might recommend you to a friend or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was like, there's like a point in my life where I was like just kind of like a young loser, and then I just like forced myself to like hit on women and like approach women. It always went well. Like, there's no, if you're just, like, polite and stop when they obviously want you to stop, there's no, like, nobody canceled me. Nobody, like, pepper sprayed me. You know what I mean? Nobody, like, took me up back and shot me. This is not like it. There's, like, there is a little bit of hysteria, surrounding this topic where guys really think that HR is going to come out of the back with a gun and that this is going to be it for them because they, like, flirted. And it's like, no, even when I worked an office job, I was like flirting with like the 40-year-old my coworkers that I worked with, and they loved it. Like it's not seriously, but
yeah, of course. It's and I'm sure you were very well versed in flirting as well. Like but it's absolutely true. Please, young men, look up to Ken. Listen to the wise master. Go out, shoot your shot a little bit more. We need it. We need brave young men in this world to go out and try and to be not afraid to fail. Or, I mean, you can't be not afraid of something. You can't just make yourself not afraid, but to overcome the fear. It's important.
And it's like, people, you can see, if you train your algorithm right, you can see, like, men getting humiliated for being attracted to women every day of, like, where, like, hundreds of thousands of people are observing their shame and humiliation, right? And, like, that could still happen to me, or, like, who knows? That is just, like, something that's out there, right? But, it's, like, I'm not trying to, like, say that sort of thing, like, doesn't exist, and it obviously has, like, a huge psychological effect on men. But it's, like, I feel like you just have to sort of, like, choose to, like, ignore that, and then your life gets a lot better. You know what I mean? Like, you could say, oh, the risk-reward isn't worth it. It's like, yeah, but are you gonna, like, die alone? Like, would you really, like... People go viral every day, and a lot of people end up forgetting about it. I mean, it's like, it's still a very rare thing that happens to you. You know what I mean?
I'm not in that part of the algorithm. Is that like, I mean, is that really like, also I find that algorithm so crazy because it's like guys are just tuning into this algorithm in order to helps them select themselves out of the gene pool, and then they just keep going back to it. It's like wild to me. Anything that like fucks
Many
with
such
evolution,
cases.
like anything that fucks with evolution
Yeah.
like that is just amazing. It's fascinating to me. But like, okay, so is it like guys? I mean, you ask a waitress or like a coffee shop girl for her number. Is it then they get like filmed and publicly out? Like, how does that? What happens to these guys? I mean, are they acting totally normally and then they just get humiliated? Like, what's going on?
I mean, I think it's a lot rarer for a guy to actually experience the humiliation, but you can like go into, like, I'm sure there's like millions of tweets where it takes like screenshots. Like, what's really popular is like screenshotting a Tinder opener and being like, this is cringe. And then posting that and then getting a lot of attention for that or whatever. And then a guy sees that and it's like, oh, that could be me. And it's like, well, the guy in the example probably hasn't even seen that, right? He's he's just hitting on people. And then, if somebody makes like a bunch of content off of him, it's like, okay. And then, even if, and I think that's probably a lot more common than the guy actually seeing it. It would have to be like really viral to like guarantee that, I would expect. Or,
And it's anonymous
like
as well,
like,
most of those.
Yeah, like most of them
cares?
don't show like face or names or anything, but it's, and then, or it's like another guy is like, oh, hey, I heard this guy hitting on this girl in line and he said this, isn't that crazy? And it's sort of like and sometimes they're funny, right? Like sometimes, it's not like sometimes I feel like a lot of the time it can be interpreted as humiliation, but sometimes it can just be funny, to be fair. So, but
Yeah, a lot of those aren't even verifiable, like actual incidents that happened.
Yeah, and then there's probably a lot of they're just people making things up. It's like, wouldn't it be funny if somebody said this to someone, hit on it, and then they're just telling it as if it's true? But it's just, there's the thing about like the internet is like it's like a panopticon, which is like, not that everybody is constantly monitored by their own prison guard constantly, but there's like one prison guard for every probably like million people out there, but he could be looking at you at any point and you don't know. It's like the uncertainty of like you could always be being monitored, right? Like someone could always be tweeting about you or videoing you or talking shit about you, and you're just like hyper aware of the fact that how many eyeballs could suddenly descend upon you at any time. That really paralyzes people. And this is not just like something that applies to young men. This is something that applies to like everybody in an online society, and it's kind of just like destroying a lot of things, not just like the dating scene or this or that. It's people are just hyper aware of the fact that they could be being observed and watched, and that makes it hard to be normal.
We kind of we're kind of evolved to have more more secrets, more rumors, like things like that. We're that's why they say Gen Z is they don't drink very much anymore, because some people were saying if you drink, like, you could just make the wrong move and then get caught on camera doing something crazy. Like, fair enough. I get it, but we live in strange times. That's okay. So thank you so much for coming on and talking about the Zizians. I look forward to, how many are left? How many Zizians are left out in the wild now?
None.
None. Okay.
There's a little bit of a media story commenting on one person with long hair who went to Adair's trial and was talking with his lawyer before and after, and then didn't want to talk to cameras. Whether or not that's like just like a friend of his or a family member of his or whatever, it's definitely sort of being presented as if there may be more Zizians, but that's not clear at this time. There's no membership for Zizians. They don't call themselves Zizians. There's no way to like, there's no membership roster that you can like get and say, and like check off and say, oh, they're all in prison. Everybody associated and sort of named as a person of interest or wanted by the police actively is currently in custody. Okay. But interesting. Wow. Yeah.
I can't wait till Ziz fakes their own death again and then gets out on bail and restarts the story.
Hey, you never
Fantastic.
know. I would surprise.
Yeah.
I would be surprised if Daniel Blank doesn't get out on bail at some point, because he's just in there for trespassing and obstruction, and I can't imagine what other charges you could come up with to put on him, right?
Yeah.
You know, Jamie is lied about her address when she was purchasing firearms that were used to kill a federal agent. So, and then
Even then, like, she wasn't. I don't think that can get you huge charges. Like, I don't know anything about firearms and stuff, but like buying firearms for that your friend ends up taking, like, that's a couple years in jail probably, but like she didn't commit those crimes.
Yeah, it would really. I would not expect Jamie or Daniel Blank to be in jail for life. Whether Ziz is in jail like indefinitely or for life probably depends on whether or not charges of the murder of the Zykos are brought against her. I do think it's the most obvious explanation that Ziz was the one who committed those crimes, although there is no evidence.
Oh, you think Ziz committed those crimes? You don't think she did?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, yeah. I think, right. And the reason I think that is because, Jamie was taken unaware. If the audio recording really does say mom, which it probably does, well, I have no idea what it does. I haven't heard it. But if it is saying mom, then it seems like she was shocked by the murders, and it happened on her birthday. Oh, and one thing I did forget to mention is she did post a lot about her parents being abusive publicly. And Kirtland, in his interview he gave for an unrelated document where he brought up the sort of Zizian saga, he said that there was correspondence, like online correspondence, that suggested that Ziz told Jamie to murder her parents and dissolve them in lie. Now, whether that, and he did get other details in that wrong. Like he said it was New York, not Pennsylvania, and he was unclear about a few other things. So he's not like, so this is the only sort of allegation that these sort of, that this sort of like obstruction even exists. And if it does exist, and Kirtland was saying that law enforcement had this, and if they did have this, then it is the way that Kirtland described, then, it would certainly be relevant for that case, but, you never know. So I do believe, and it was Jamie's birthday, so I believe, and the fact that, Jamie was there and her only alibi was Daniel Blank, and, was sort of taken aback and sort of shouted and screamed loud enough for the neighbor's Ring camera to pick it up. In my mind, the most obvious explanation is that Ziz decided to murder Jamie's parents on behalf of her, and also possibly for money, because that Jamie has a trust, I believe, set up from her parents, so that she would inherit all that money, and they could use it to save the world. And I think that, that Jamie was probably really taken aback and not realizing that this was going to happen, but then after the fact sort of like agreed to, help Ziz sort of get away with it. That would be the most obvious explanation in my mind, although this is all pure speculation, and, it's all alleged.
My main takeaway here is that you can commit crimes and get away with them. It's possible, even in today's day and age with cameras.
Yeah.
Yep, you can commit a lot of crimes and still get away with them. It's yeah, okay. Ziz has gotten away with a lot. That's insane. Okay, go on.
It's also not. I think also like the prosecution is going to be hacking into the laptops, and it's not clear to what extent they've sort of practiced digital hygiene in terms of that. So that could lead to more things that the general public is just like not going to know about. We know that they confiscated a lot of laptops, and the Zizians have had lots of laptops sort of from the very beginning. But then we also know that they were paranoid, so it's very not clear in terms of like guessing what's going to be uncovered from that.
Yep. Well, I hope you get to interview them. I would love to see that. It's incredible.
I would love to see that too.
Yeah. All right. I think it's time I let you go. Thank you so much for coming on and giving this amazing interview.
Yeah, no problem. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's so funny how like it was like we talked about the Zizians, and then also we would get sidetracked on like other stuff.
Yeah.
Like the
I'm
like
thinking,
the dating discourse.
yeah. I'm kind of considering putting that in Patreon. Like, just maybe leaving this as a Zizian podcast, and then maybe putting the
Okay.
rest of it on Patreon. A Jordan Peterson discourse and dating discourse. That might be what I do.
Hey, sure.
Yeah. All right. Thanks so much, Uncle Kenny, and I'll talk to you later.
All right, talk to you later.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.